In metallurgy, there are certain materials whose concentration needs to be known. But have you ever wondered how their concentration affects their value, quality, and uses? Well, I'm here to talk about that. Hi, I'm Marco, and this is Metallurgy Analysis. Today, we're going to look at some of the most important metals used in the industry. First, we have copper, which can be found in many places, especially in electrical wiring, and also valuable in the market. Then, there's lead. Lead is commonly used in heavy-duty batteries, and also there is zinc, is another important metal with application ranging from industry to medicine. And of course, iron, one of the most widely used metals because of its strength and importance in construction. Now that we know that these metals and their uses, here's another question. How do we actually determine their value or grade? If you don't know, let's find out together. First, we have the copper assay, which is used to determine the grade or concentration of copper in a sample. To do this, we need several materials and reagents, and here are the tools we'll be using for the copper assay. Now that we know that, let's proceed to the step 1, weigh the sample. First, the copper bearing sample is accurately weighed using analytical balance. The measured sample is then transferred into an Erlenmeyer flask. Step 2. Add nitric acid to the sample. The acid dissolves the material and converts the copper into Cu2 plus ions. Sulfuric acid may also be added to provide required acidic conditions. Step 3. After the sample has dissolved, the solution can be transferred or diluted using a volumetric flask. A funnel can be used to make the transfer easy, while a wash bottle is used to rinse the flask to ensure that none of that sample is left behind. Step 4. A measured amount of potassium iodide is added to the copper solution using a pipette. The Cu2 plus reacts with iodide ions, forming a copper iodide and releasing iodine, which is the 2Cu2 plus 4I, in which copper 2 plus reacts with two iodide ions to form copper iodide 2, and which produces 2 copper iodide and iodine. In chemistry, you can also say that it is a Cu2 plus 2I minus yields Cui2 yields 2Cui plus I2. The iodine is released is what we will measure through titration. Step 5. Fill the burette with a standardized sodium thiosulfate solution. Slowly add it to the copper solution while swirling the Erlenmeyer flask. The sodium thiosulfate reacts with the iodine and makes I2 plus TuS2O3 2 minus yields 2I minus plus S4O6 2 minus. Then step 6, when the solution becomes pale yellow, add a few drops of starch indicator and the solution will turn blue-black because starch reacts with the remaining iodine. Step 7, continue adding sodium thiosulfate drop by drop until the blue-black color completely disappears. Record the volume of thiosulfate used from the burette. Step 8, finally, the volume is concentration of sodium thiosulfate are used to calculate the amount of copper in the original sample. The result is expressed as the percentage or grade of copper. So basically, we first dissolve the sample, then use potassium iodide to release iodine. We measure the iodine by titrating it with sodium thiosulfate. From the amount of titrant we used, we can determine how much copper was present and therefore the grade of the sample. And next, here we have zinc assay. And here is the tools and devices used to calculate the concentration of zinc. Now that we know, here is the step-by-step of zinc assay. Step 1. Accurately weigh a known amount of zinc-bearing sample using an analytical balance. Step 2. Transfer the sample to a beaker and add hydrochloric acid. Heat gently if necessary until the zinc dissolves forms Zn2 plus ions. Step 3. Transfer the solution to a volumetric flask, dilute it, and with distilled water to the mark and mix thoroughly. Step 4. Using a pipette, transform a known volume of the zinc solution into an Erlenmeyer flask. Step 5. Add the ammonia or ammonium buffer to bring the solution to the appropriate pH for the zinc EDTA reaction. Step 6. Add a few drops of Eriochrome black tea. The indicator forms a colored complex with zinc. Step 7. Fill the burette with standardized EDTA solution. Slowly add EDTA to the flask while swirling. EDTA binds with the zinc, becomes Zn2 plus EDTA yields Zn-EDTA complex. Step 8. Continue titrating until the indicator changes color, showing that essentially all the Zn2 plus has reacted with EDTA. Step 9. Record the volume of EDTA used using its concentration and the original sample mass. Calculate the amount percentage of zinc in the sample. For zinc assay, we first dissolve the sample to release zinc ions. We then adjust the pH and add the indicator before titrating with EDTA. Since EDTA reacts with zinc in a known ratio, the amount of EDTA required tells us how much zinc is present, and from that, we can determine the grade of the sample. Now we continue in the lead assay. Here is the tools and equipments used to determine the concentration of a lead assay. Now that we know, here is the step-by-step process on how it is processed. Step 1. Weigh the sample. Accurate weigh a known amount of lead-bearing sample using an analytical balance. Step 2. Dissolve the sample. Transfer the sample into a beaker and add nitric acid. Heat gently if necessary until the sample dissolves and the lead is converted into Pb2 plus ions. Step 3. Add sulfuric acid to the solution. The Pb2 plus reacts with sulfate ions and forms a white precipitate of lead sulfate. Becomes Pb2 plus SO4 2 minus yields PbSO4S. Step 4. Heat the solution gently and allow it to stand so the PbSO4 precipitate can form and settle. Step 5. Use a funnel and filter paper to separate the solid PbSO4 from the liquid. Wash the precipitate and distilled water to remove insoluble impurities. Step 6. Transfer the filter paper and precipitate to a pair-way crucible and dry or ignite according to the specific laboratory procedure until a constant mass is obtained. Step 7. After cooling, weigh the crucible containing the dried PbSO4 using the analytical balance. Step 8. The mass of PbSO4 is converted to the corresponding mass of lead using the molecular weight relationship, and the percentage of lead in the original sample is calculated. For lead assay, we first dissolve the sample using nitric acid, then we add the sulfuric acid to turn the lead ions into a solid lead sulfate precipitate. We filter, wash, and dry and weigh the precipitate. Finally, from its mass, we can calculate how much lead was present in the original sample. Simple explanation for the iron assay. For iron assay, we first dissolve the sample and convert the iron into the form that we need for titration. We then use potassium permanganate to react with Fe2 plus ions. Once a faint pink color remains, we know we've reached the endpoint. From the amount of permanganate used, we can calculate how much iron was present in the sample. So far, we've looked at the classical methods, where the analysis depends on chemical reactions, precipitation, and titration. But what if we could analyze these materials using instruments that can detect and measure elements much faster? That brings us to the instrumentation methods of analysis. In this part, we'll look into the spectrophotometry, X-ray diffraction and fluorescence, and microanalysis, and see how these techniques are used in modern material and metallurgical analysis. So let's move let so let's move on. After looking at the classical methods, we now move on to instrumental methods of analysis. Unlike classical methods, which mainly depend on chemical reaction and measurements, instrumental methods use specialized instruments to detect and measure the properties of a sample. There are three methods we're going to discuss: spectrophotometry, X ray diffraction, and X ray fluorescence, and microanalysis. First is spectrophotometry. So, what exactly is spectrophotometry? Spectrophotometry is a method that measures how much light a sample absorbs at a specific wavelength. The amount of light absorbed can then be related to the concentration of a particular substance in the sample. The main instrument used is a spectrophotometer. The process is relatively simple. First, the sample is prepared and placed in a cuvette. Light of a specific wavelength is then passed through the sample. Some of the light is absorbed, while the rest passes through. The instrument disabsorption, known as absorbance. Generally, the higher the concentration of the substance, the greater the absorbance. This relationship is described by the Beer-Lambert law. So in simple terms, the sample, then the light, then its absorbance, then the concentration. In metallurgy, spectrophotometry can be used to determine the concentration of a certain metals in solutions, including copper, iron, zinc, and other elements, depending on the analytical method used. Its main advantage are that it is relatively fast, sensitive, requires only small amount of sample. However, the sample usually needs to be properly prepared, and the method can be affected by interfering substances. Next, we have X-ray analysis. Although XRD and XRF both use X-rays, they are used for different purposes. X-ray diffraction, or XRD, is mainly used to determine the crystalline structure and mineral phases present in a material. Here's the basic idea. When X-ray hit a crystalline material, the atoms within the crystal cause the X-ray to diffract in a specific direction. The instrument records these diffraction patterns. The resulting pattern can then be compared with known patterns to identify the minerals or crystalline phases present. The basic process is X-rays, then crystal, then diffraction pattern, then identify mineral or phase. In metallurgy and mineral processing, XRD can be useful for identifying minerals in ores, determining crystalline compounds, and studying changes in material during processing. X-ray fluorescence, or XRF. XRF, on the other hand, is mainly used to determine the element composition of a sample. When a sample is exposed to X-rays, its atom can emit their own extrinsic characteristics, X-rays. These emitted X-rays are detected to the instrument, and their energies can tell us which element are present. The basic process is X-rays, sample, characteristic X-rays, identify and quantify elements. XRF is widely used for analyzing ores, rocks, metals, and other materials because it can determine multiple elements in a relatively short time. So remember, XRD tells us about the crystalline phases, while the XRF tells us about the elemental composition. Finally, we have microanalysis. As the name suggests, microanalysis focuses on analyzing very small areas or individual particles within a material. One common instrument used in the scanning electron microscope, or SEM, often combined with energy dispersive X ray spectroscopy, or EDS. The SEM uses an electron beam to scan the surface of a sample. As the beam interacts with the material, different signals are produced. With EDS, the characteristic X-rays produced by the sample can be detected to determine which elements are present in a specific area. This means we can examine not just overall composition of a sample, but even the composition of a specific grain, particle, or tiny region. The basic process is electron beam, then small area of sample, then X-ray signal, and then elemental composition. Microanalysis is particularly useful in metallurgy and mineralogy for identifying individual mineral gains, studying inclusions, investigating defects, and determining the composition of very small features that might be missed by a bulk analysis. Its major advantage is its ability to provide localized chemical information. However, the equipment is more specialized and expensive, and sample preparation may be more demanding. So, to summarize, spectrophotometry uses light absorption to determine concentration. XRD uses diffraction patterns to identify crystalline structures and mineral phases, while XRF uses characteristic X-rays to determine elemental composition, and microanalysis allow us to examine the composition of very small areas or individual particles. These methods give us more detailed way of understanding the materials we work within metallurgy, mining, and mineral processing. And that would be all. Thank you.